Hi guys, and welcome back to my study hack series. This is the 18th study hack in the series, and what we're going to look at is quite a common question that people have, which is how much sleep should I be getting? So again, I'm going to start with a quote, and this is, "Sleep is the best meditation." That is by Dalai Lama. So obviously sleep has a lot of benefits that we're not really sure of like completely yet, but it is extremely important, and I think it's also extremely underrated in society, because again there are so many benefits to it that we are not simply unaware of. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to say read out some recommendations by the sleep experts about how much sleep you should be getting. So this is from the National Sleep Foundation. So I'm going to start with probably 6 to 13 age bracket, which is young school children to sort of like young secondary school students. So if you're between the age of 6 and 13, they recommend 9 to 11 hours of sleep. But if you're going to do the bare minimum, so you can have like the lowest amount they could possibly say that you could do is 7. So as a minimum 7 if you're in between the age of 6 and 13 years old. Then if you're the age between 14 and 17, they recommend between 8 to 10 hours, but as a minimum you can do 7. And if you're 18 plus, so if you're a student, like university student for example, you can do between 7 to 9 hours they recommend, but as a minimum you have the lowest you can go is 6 hours. So this is what I'm going to talk about here is basically something called the 888 rule, because I think it's relevant to bring up here, which is that if you have 24 hours in a day, if you divide those hours by 3, you get 8. So in other words, if you split those hours into 3 sections, you get one section of 8, second section of 8, and third section of 8. So basically those 3 sections are work, play and sleep. So what they're saying basically is that you should get 8 hours of sleep. That rule says you should get 8 hours of sleep, play for 8 hours and do 8 hours of work. Now the thing that we're going to talk about here is the sleep amount. So if that is a recommendation, that seems to fit like pretty well with the numbers that the National Sleep Foundation recommends as well, which I'll include a link in the description below about that. So what I can say from this, my understanding of this and looking at all these numbers, that the action step I can give to you is that as a bare minimum, if you're between the age of 6 and 17, as a bare minimum you should be sleeping 7 hours, and I would say as a maximum you should be sleeping 8 hours. And if you're above the age of 18 plus, as a bare minimum you should be sleeping 6 hours, and as a maximum you should be sleeping 8 hours. The reason why I say maximum of 8 hours is because even though it has benefit to sleep for those few extra hours, actually what you're doing is you are wasting time essentially in your day, because that time could be spent doing other things. So it's like you can also, not only could you get too little sleep, like I say, as a minimum amount, like if you go below minimum, but actually you can actually get too much sleep. You know, if you sleep for too long, you actually, that's that time, those extra 2 hours. Let's say if you sleep for 10 hours, that's 2 hours past the maximum I said of 8. Then those 2 hours could have been spent doing other things, doing other activities. And even though like some people say, okay, it's good to get those 10 hours and you need it, but actually the recommendations show that you don't really need to go past 8 hours. You know, and as a minimum you can sort of like get away with 7 even if you wanted to. So the action step would be to get between 7 and 8 hours if you're between the age of 6 and 17, and above if you're above the age of 18 or 18 plus student, then between 6 and 8 hours of sleep. And I would make sure that you track those hours carefully. So in other words, set an alarm. So you know when you're going to sleep. For example, let's say you go to sleep, you're going to wake up 10 o'clock, you're going to wake up 5 o'clock the next day. You need to be asleep by 10 o'clock that night. If you're going to wake up 7 o'clock the next day, you need to be asleep by 12 o'clock that night. So make sure you know how many hours you're getting sleep. Track that very carefully, and make sure you're hitting those somewhere between those the minimum and maximum recommended amounts I mentioned for those different, depending on which age bracket you're in. So that's it for the amount of sleep. Don't undersleep, but also at the same time don't oversleep. And please like this video, comment down below, and subscribe to my channel so you can keep getting content. And I will see you in the next study hack.